Welcome to Passions Illustrated. Before starting the video, make sure to like, share, and subscribe.
The delicate sapphire necklace rested on Sophia Montgomery's collarbone like a secret too heavy to carry. Her fingers instinctively touched the jewel as she watched Julian, her husband, from across the table during dinner in their apartment on Manhattan's Upper East Side. The silence between them was dense, laden with unspoken words and hidden truths. "You're still wearing that necklace." Julian's voice sounded more like a statement than a question. His normally gentle blue eyes hardened slightly as he stared at the object. "I thought you agreed to keep it." Sophia felt her heart race. "It's just a necklace, Julian. It doesn't mean anything." But even she could sense the falsity in her own words. The necklace meant much more than she was willing to admit even after 5 years of marriage. The story of the necklace went back to her days in San Francisco when she met Marcus Reynolds, a prominent gallerist who had captured her heart during her college years. Their relationship had been intense, passionate, and like many intense things had ended devastatingly. The necklace had been his last gift given to him the night everything fell apart. "Sophia." Julian leaned forward, his expression softening. "We've been married for 5 years. We've built a life together. Why do you insist on clinging to something that represents your past with him?" The irony didn't escape Sophia. There she was, constantly warning Julian about the dangers of his close friendship with his work colleague Rebecca, while she herself refused to let go of this last vestige of Marcus. Dinner was interrupted by Sophia's phone ringing. The name that flashed up on the screen made her stomach turn. Madeleine Laurent. The designer of the necklace, a French artist who had settled in New York a decade ago, was rarely in touch. In fact, Sophia had only met her once during a jewelry exhibition years ago. "Hello," Sophia answered, trying to keep her voice steady. "Sophia, it's Madeleine. We need to talk about the sapphire necklace. There's something you need to know." Sophia's world began to spin. She had always known that there was more to the story of the necklace than Marcus had told her, but for years she had chosen to ignore the inconsistencies in his narrative. "Can we meet tomorrow?" Madeleine's voice sounded urgent. "It's important." Sophia agreed, automatically arranging to meet in the small cafe next to Madeleine's studio in Soho. When she hung up, she realized that Julian was watching her intently. That was her, wasn't it? The designer? Julian knew his wife's expression too well to be fooled. What does she want after all this time? "I don't know," Sophia answered honestly, but her stomach was filled with nervous butterflies. "I'll find her tomorrow." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of unresolved tension. Sophia took refuge in her office, where she worked as an editor for an art magazine, trying to concentrate on an article about an upcoming exhibition. But her thoughts kept returning to Marcus, to the necklace, and to all the questions she'd never had the courage to ask. Meanwhile, Julian remained in the living room, absent-mindedly leafing through a book on architecture, his passion and profession. The occasional sound of turning pages was interrupted only by the ticking of the antique clock they had bought together on their honeymoon in Charleston. That night, lying in bed next to Julian, Sophia couldn't sleep. The necklace rested in its velvet box on the bedside table, but its presence seemed to fill the whole room. She thought about how her life had become intertwined with that jewel the moment Marcus gave it to her, the way Julian frowned every time he saw her wearing it, and now Madeleine's mysterious phone call. The most disturbing thing was how she preached to Julian about transparency and honesty in their marriage, especially in relation to Rebecca, while keeping her own shadows carefully hidden. Rebecca, with her natural charm and obvious admiration for Julian, posed a threat that Sophia could see and name. But what did her own inability to get rid of the necklace represent? As the evening progressed, Sophia realized that she was about to face truths that she had avoided for years. Madeleine's phone call wasn't just about a necklace, it was about unearthing long-buried secrets, about facing up to the past that she had carefully packed up and put away like an ancient relic, too late to be returned. Next to her, Julian was breathing deeply, lost in his own dreams. Sophia reached out and gently touched his face, feeling a wave of guilt and love mix in her chest. Tomorrow she would find out what Madeleine had to say, and perhaps she would finally find the courage to confront not only the truth about the necklace, but also about herself. The clock struck 3 in the morning when Sophia finally fell asleep, her dreams populated by blue sapphires and unspoken truths, while the city that never sleeps continued its eternal murmur beyond the apartment's windows. The cafe in Soho was practically empty when Sophia arrived the next morning. Her heels echoed against the wooden floor as she made her way to a table at the back where Madeleine Laurent was already waiting for her. The French designer, with her elegantly groomed gray hair and gold-framed glasses, emanated an aura of sophistication that perfectly matched her creations. "You're still wearing the necklace?" Madeleine observed, her eyes fixed on the sapphire resting on Sophia's neck. There was no accusation in her voice, just calculated curiosity. "I've always worn it," Sophia replied, settling back in her chair. "It's a beautiful piece." "It's more than that, isn't it?" Madeleine took a sip of her espresso. "Do you know why I called you here today?" Sophia shook her head negatively, feeling her heart racing. The waitress approached and she ordered a cappuccino just to give herself a few seconds to collect herself. "Marcus came to see me last week," Madeleine began, her words carefully chosen. "He's back in New York and wants to get the necklace back." The world seemed to freeze around Sophia. "Get it back, but he gave it to me as a present." Madeleine sighed deeply. "Not exactly. You see, that necklace has a history that precedes you, Sophia. It was commissioned by Marcus for his wife, Caroline." "Wife?" The word came out as a strangled whisper. "Marcus was never married." "Oh, ma chérie." Madeleine leaned forward, her expression softening. "Marcus was married when he met you. Caroline was undergoing cancer treatment in Houston. The necklace was supposed to be a celebratory gift for her recovery." The memories began to rearrange themselves in Sophia's mind like pieces of a distorted puzzle. Marcus's frequent trips to Houston, which he said were for work. The phone calls. He never answered in front of her. The photographs she never saw in his apartment because he always took her to his studio. "Caroline passed away before he could deliver the necklace," Madeleine continued. "Marcus was devastated, started drinking, and that's when you came into his life." The waitress returned with the cappuccino, but Sophia barely noticed her. Her hands were shaking so much that she had to interlace them on the table. "Why didn't he ever tell me?" "Grieving people make questionable choices," Madeleine replied softly. "He used you as an escape from reality and the necklace. Well, I think giving it to you was his twisted way of moving on." Sophia felt nauseous. Every moment with Marcus, every precious memory she had treasured was now tainted by this revelation. And Julian. How would she explain it to Julian? "Caroline was my friend," Madeleine continued. "We worked together on the design of the necklace. Every detail was chosen to represent her history with Marcus. The central sapphire represents the day they met in a seaside cafe on Cape Cod. The small diamonds around it symbolize the years of their marriage." Tears began to stream down Sophia's face. For years, she had worn a piece of jewelry that told another woman's love story while insisting that Julian keep his distance from Rebecca. "Marcus is sober now," Madeleine explained. "He's trying to make peace with his past. The necklace. He wants to donate it to the oncology ward of the hospital where Caroline was treated." Sophia's cell phone vibrated. It was a message from Julian asking how she was. Guilt consumed her as she thought of all the times she had questioned her friendship with Rebecca while she herself had been wrapped up in a much bigger lie. "What happened to Caroline wasn't your fault," Madeleine gently touched her hand. "You were also a victim of circumstances." Sophia brought her hands to the clasp of the necklace, her trembling fingerprints struggling with the mechanism. When she finally managed to remove it, the jewel seemed to weigh a ton in her hands. "Can you give it to him?" Her voice was just a whisper. Madeleine nodded, putting the necklace away in a small velvet box she took from her handbag. "You have a good man at home, Sophia. Don't let ghosts from the past ruin that." Leaving the cafe, Sophia felt simultaneously lighter and heavier. The weight of the necklace had been lifted from her neck, but the weight of the truth sat heavily on her heart. Her phone vibrated again, another message from Julian, this time with a photo of him and Rebecca in a project meeting, clearly keeping a professional distance from each other. She needed to tell Julian the truth. About the necklace, about Marcus, about everything. But first, she needed to make peace with her own choices and with the hypocrisy she had allowed to grow in her marriage like a poisonous vine. As she walked through the busy streets of Soho, Sophia realized that there was more at stake than just a necklace or a story from the past. It was about honesty, trust, and the courage to face uncomfortable truths. And maybe this revelation was exactly what her marriage needed to strengthen. Sophia stood in front of the mirror in the elevator of her building, observing the empty space on her neck where the necklace used to rest. The jewel's absence seemed to shout louder than its presence ever had. When the doors opened on the 12th floor, she hesitated before walking down the corridor to her apartment. Julian was sitting on the sofa in the living room, architectural plans scattered across the coffee table. He looked up when she entered, and his expression changed instantly when he noticed the absence of the necklace. "What happened?" he asked, getting up. Sophia dropped her bag on the floor and walked over to him, Madeleine's words still echoing in her mind. "We need to talk, Julian, about everything." Over the next hour, Sophia unearthed every fragment of the truth she had just discovered. She told her about Caroline, about Marcus's lies, about how she had been used as an escape valve for a broken man's grief. Her words cascaded out, sometimes interrupted by sobs, others by long moments of silence. "All this time," Julian finally said, his voice controlled, "have you criticized me for my friendship with Rebecca while carrying this?" "I know," Sophia replied, feeling the weight of hypocrisy in every syllable. "I became exactly the kind of person I feared you would be." Julian stood up, walking over to the window overlooking Central Park. The afternoon sun painted elongated shadows across the room, creating a play of light and dark that seemed appropriate for the moment. "It's not the same," he said at last. "You didn't know the truth about the necklace, about Marcus." "But I suspected there was more to the story," Sophia admitted. "There were signs, inconsistencies. I chose not to see." Julian's phone vibrated. It was Rebecca, probably about the project they were working on. He looked at the screen, and for the first time, Sophia saw the situation through his eyes, the transparent trust he always maintained even when she doubted. "You can take this," she said softly. "I trust you." Julian shook his head and silenced the phone. "It can wait. We're more important now." He sat down next to her again, taking her hands in his. "How are you really feeling about Marcus, about Caroline?" "Betrayed," Sophia replied after a moment's thought. "Not just by Marcus, but by myself. I spent years romanticizing that relationship, turning it into something it never was. And now. Sophia looked down at her intertwined hands. "Now I realize that I've been so busy protecting our marriage from outside threats that I didn't realize how I myself was sabotaging it." Julian pulled her closer, and she rested her head on his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of his cologne mixed with coffee and plant paper. "Do you know what scares me the most?" she continued. "How easy it was for Marcus to create a whole alternative reality. He erased Caroline from his life as if she'd never existed, used me as a bandage for a wound I didn't even know existed. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones who are hurt the most," Julian reflected. "That doesn't make it right, but it helps to understand." The sun was beginning to set, casting orange hues across the room. Sophia thought of Caroline, a woman she had never met but whose necklace she had carried for so long. She thought about how love stories can intertwine in unexpected and painful ways. "I want us to go to couples therapy," she said abruptly. "Not because we're having problems, but because I want to build something even stronger. I want to learn to trust not just you, but myself." Julian smiled, that gentle smile that had made her fall in love with him years ago. "I'd love that." His phone vibrated again. This time it was an email from the office. Sophia encouraged him to check it, realizing that she no longer needed to feel that twinge of jealousy or suspicion. While he quickly replied to the message, she went into the kitchen and started preparing tea for them both. "Rebecca and I have finished the preliminary designs for the community center," Julian commented, joining her in the kitchen. "Would you like to take a look? Your opinion has always been valuable to me." Sophia nodded, realizing it was a small but significant step towards deeper trust. As he spread the drawings out on the kitchen worktop, animatedly explaining every detail of the project, she felt a peace she hadn't experienced for a long time. The absence of the necklace around her neck was no longer a void but a space for something new to grow. Something based on truth, trust, and the kind of love that doesn't need physical symbols to sustain itself. The next morning, the apartment was immersed in a different kind of stillness. Sophia woke up before the alarm clock, watching Julian sleeping peacefully beside her. The previous night's conversation had left invisible marks on both of them, like emotional tattoos that needed time to heal. She slipped silently out of bed and walked to the kitchen where she began to prepare coffee. Through the window, Manhattan awoke to its usual symphony of distant horns and sirens. His phone vibrated a message from Madeleine confirming that the necklace had been delivered to Marcus. "Good morning." Julian emerged from the kitchen, still drowsy. "Couldn't sleep." "I was thinking of booking our first therapy session," Sophia replied, handing him a cup of coffee. "Dr. Henderson was recommended by my colleague Lisa. She has an office in Greenwich Village." Julian nodded, taking a sip of coffee. "We can go next week. I have an important presentation today with Rebecca about the community center." For the first time, Sophia noticed how Rebecca's name didn't provoke that familiar twinge of jealousy. In its place, there was a genuine curiosity about the project. "Tell me more about the center," she asked, taking a seat at the kitchen table. "I didn't get a chance to see all the details yesterday." Julian's face lit up as he explained. The innovative aspects of the design integrated green areas, multi-use spaces, solar energy. Sophia watched him amazed at his passion and expertise, wondering why he had allowed his insecurities to cloud this vision for so long. Rebecca suggested including a space dedicated to art therapy. Julian mentioned, hesitating slightly before continuing. "Actually, I thought you might be able to help us with that. Your experience as an art editor would be invaluable." The proposal took Sophia by surprise. It was an invitation to be part of Julian's professional world, something she had unconsciously avoided for fear of confronting his relationship with Rebecca. "I'd love to," she replied, realizing that she really did want to be a part of it. Later that day, while working in her office at the magazine, Sophia received an unexpected email. It was from Caroline Reynolds, Caroline's sister, Marcus's first wife. Madeleine had shared her story. "Dear Sophia, I hesitated a long time before writing this email. My sister Caroline was an extraordinary person, and knowing that you unknowingly carried a part of her story has touched me deeply. I would like to meet her if you are willing. There are stories about Caroline that deserve to be shared not as ghosts of the past, but as a celebration of who she was." Sophia reread the email several times, her hands trembling slightly on the keyboard. She looked at the framed photo on her desk, her and Julian on their wedding day, genuine smiles and eyes sparkling with hope. After a few minutes of reflection, she replied, "Dear Caroline, yes, I'd love to meet you. Your sister deserves to be remembered and celebrated. We can meet when it's convenient for you." The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity. Sophia immersed herself in her work editing articles and selecting photographs for the next issue of the magazine. Around 5 o'clock, she received a message from Julian inviting her to visit the architectural firm and take part in an informal meeting about the community center project. In the elevator on the way to Julian's office, Sophia felt a mixture of anxiety and determination. The mirror reflected a different woman from the one who used to wear the sapphire necklace lighter truer to herself. Rebecca greeted them at the entrance to the office, her smile professional and welcoming. "Sophia, how nice of you to come. Julian told me about your experience with art. Your suggestions will be very valuable to the project." The next 3 hours were filled with productive discussions about the community center. Sophia observed the dynamic between Julian and Rebecca purely professional, focused, and respectful. She contributed ideas for the art therapy space, suggesting partnerships with local galleries and artist residency programs. "This is brilliant," Rebecca commented, making enthusiastic notes. "Your perspective brings exactly what we were looking for." At the end of the meeting, as they walked home in the early Manhattan evening, Julian entwined his fingers in Sophia's. "You were amazing today," he said softly. "I was just being myself," she replied, realizing that it was the first time in a long time that she could say that with complete honesty. That night, lying in bed, Sophia thought about how a single day could contain so many layers of healing and discovery. The email from Caroline's sister, the meeting at the architect's office every moment seemed like a small step towards something bigger. "What are you thinking about?" Julian asked, noticing her distant gaze. "About how sometimes we need to lose something to find something bigger," she replied, turning to face him. "The necklace was an anchor holding me to the past. Now I feel like I can really move forward." Julian pulled her closer and they stood in silence for a moment, just listening to the beating of their hearts and the whisper of the city outside. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, the first therapy session meeting Caroline's sister developing the community center project. But for the first time in a long time, Sophia was looking forward to facing them. The cafe chosen for the meeting with Angela, Caroline's sister, was a cozy establishment in the West Village. Sophia had arrived 15 minutes earlier, her restless hands repeatedly adjusting the cup of tea in front of her. Julian had offered to accompany her, but she knew she had to do it alone. When Angela entered the cafe, Sophia recognized her instantly. There was something about the way she moved, a quiet grace that seemed to echo the stories Madeleine had told her about Caroline. Her red hair was tied up in an elegant bun, and her green eyes carried a mixture of gentleness and melancholy. "Sophia," Angela asked, approaching the table. "You look exactly as Madeleine described." The two women hugged briefly, a gesture that surprised both of them for its naturalness. After placing their orders, a momentary silence hung between them, laden with untold stories. "I've brought something I'd like to show you," Angela said, opening her handbag. She took out a small, worn photo album. "These are pictures of Caroline and Marcus during their happy years." Sophia hesitated before opening the album. The first photo showed a smiling couple on Cape Cod, the same place where Marcus had said the sapphire blue reminded him of the sea. Now she understood the true meaning behind that comparison. Caroline was an art teacher. Angela continued, her voice soft. She believed that art had healing powers. When she became ill, she continued teaching her high school students online, as long as she could. "That's why the necklace had all those specific details," Sophia murmured, running her fingers over a photo of Caroline wearing a blue dress, her laughter frozen in time. "Marcus loved her deeply," Angela explained. "The cancer was diagnosed 3 years after the wedding. He stayed by her side throughout the treatment, but after she left, well, he lost himself." Sophia felt tears forming in her eyes. "I'm sorry he used her memory like that. Don't apologize for his mistakes." Angela touched her hand, gently. "Caroline would have been happy to know that the necklace will be used to help other cancer patients. That's how she saw life, finding purpose even in pain." The conversation flowed naturally from there. Angela shared stories about her sister, her passions, her dreams, her strength in the face of illness. Sophia talked about her work on the art magazine and the community center project with Julian. "You know," Angela commented, "Caroline always said that coincidences are the universe whispering. Maybe it's no coincidence that you ended up involved with an art therapy project just now. Sophia thought about how her life had changed over the last few weeks. The loss of the necklace had opened up new possibilities, new understandings. "Would you like to take part in the community center project?" Sophia asked suddenly. "Your experience of art therapy through Caroline's experiences would be invaluable." Angela's eyes sparkled. It would be a wonderful way to honor her memory. When they said goodbye 2 hours later, Sophia felt as if she had met not only Caroline's sister, but a piece of herself that had been lost. On the way home, she called Julian. "How was it?" he asked, his voice conveying concern even over the phone. "Transformer," she replied. "Julian, I think we found our perfect consultant for the art therapy program." That evening over dinner, Sophia shared with Julian all the stories Angela had told her, about how Caroline used art to help her students process difficult emotions about her courageous battle with cancer, about how her legacy could continue through the community center. "It's amazing how things connect," Julian reflected, pouring them both more wine. "How something that started with so much pain can turn into something so meaningful." "Our first therapy session is tomorrow," Sophia reminded him, feeling a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. "I think I'm finally ready to really look forward." Julian smiled, that smile that still made her heart race after all these years. "We're building something special here, aren't we?" "Yes," she replied, thinking about how sometimes you have to deconstruct in order to build something stronger, something real. The first therapy session with Dr. Henderson turned out to be more intense than Sophia and Julian had imagined. The office, with its soft-toned walls and view of a small garden in Greenwich Village, created a cozy atmosphere that invited honesty. "Tell me about the necklace," Dr. Henderson asked after the initial introductions. Her tone was gentle but direct. Julian held Sophia's hand as she retold the whole story. The therapist occasionally took notes, her attentive eyes catching not only the words but also the unspoken emotions that permeated each sentence. "It's interesting how objects can become emotional anchors," Dr. Henderson observed. "Sophia, have you replaced the physical presence of the necklace with something more valuable?" "The truth," Sophia replied after a moment's reflection, "and the chance to turn a story of loss into something meaningful through the community center project." The session progressed to a discussion about trust and communication. Julian talked about his feelings regarding Sophia's suspicions about Rebecca, while Sophia shared her deepest fears about abandonment and betrayal. After the session, walking along Christopher Street, the couple stopped at a small Italian cafe. The aroma of freshly ground coffee and fresh pasta filled the air as they processed the intensity of the therapy. "Angela has agreed to take part in the project," Sophia commented absent-mindedly, stirring her cappuccino. "She has some amazing ideas about how to integrate art therapy into the program." "Rebecca will be thrilled," Julian replied, and for the first time, Sophia felt nothing but excitement at the thought of the partnership that was forming. "We have a meeting tomorrow with the investors. You should present the art therapy part of the program." That evening, while working on her presentation, Sophia received an unexpected email from Marcus. Her heart raced when she saw his name on the screen, but it was no longer that old romantic anxiety. It was something more complex, a mixture of compassion and closure. "Dear Sophia, Madeleine told me about your conversation with Angela. I can't undo the past or the lies I told, but I want you to know that the necklace is now where it should always have been, helping other people who are going through what Caroline went through. The art therapy program you're developing would be something she would have loved. I hope you find the happiness you deserve. Marcus." Sophia shared the email with Julian, who hugged her in silence. No words were needed, they both understood that this moment marked the true end of a chapter in their lives. The next morning, the architecture office was full of energy. Rebecca had prepared a detailed presentation of the project, and Sophia felt completely at ease presenting her part of the art therapy program. Angela was present, sharing her unique perspective on how art can aid the healing process. "It's extraordinary how you've managed to integrate therapeutic elements into the design of the space," commented one of the investors, visibly impressed. During the celebratory lunch after the project was approved, Sophia observed how Julian and Rebecca interacted professionally, realizing that her previous jealousy had been more about her own insecurities than any real threat. "You've completely transformed the project," Rebecca told Sophia, her enthusiasm genuine. "I can't wait to see the impact it will have on the community." Angela, who was sitting next to Sophia, smiled softly. "Caroline always said that art has the power to heal not only those who create it, but also those who witness it. This center will be a testament to that." That afternoon, walking around the site where the center would be built, Sophia imagined how that empty space would be transformed into a place of healing and transformation. Julian was animatedly explaining the architectural details, his eyes shining with the same passion that had made her fall in love with him. "You know what's funny?" she commented as they watched the sunset paint the Manhattan sky in shades of pink and orange. "I spent so much time worrying about protecting our marriage from outside threats that I almost didn't realize how we were building something extraordinary together." Julian pulled her close, kissing her forehead. "Sometimes we need to lose something to find something greater." Sophia instinctively touched the place where the necklace used to be, realizing that that empty space no longer represented a loss, but an opening to new possibilities. The community center would be more than just a project. It would be a symbol of how stories of loss can be transformed into stories of hope and healing. A month after the community center project was approved, Sophia was standing in front of an audience in the New York University Auditorium presenting her expanded vision for the art therapy program. At Angela's invitation, she had developed a proposal to expand the initiative to other community centers around the city. "Art is not just expression," Sophia explained, her firm voice echoing through the auditorium. "It's a bridge between our deepest experiences and our ability to heal. What began as a personal story of loss has turned into an opportunity to create spaces of transformation for the whole community." Julian, sitting in the front row next to Rebecca and Angela, smiled proudly. His wife's transformation over the last few weeks had been remarkable. The absence of the necklace had given way to a more authentic and assured presence. After the presentation, as the participants gathered for a cocktail, Madeleine Laurent appeared unexpectedly, her eyes shining with approval. "Magnificent, ma chérie." She hugged Sophia warmly. "Caroline would be proud to see how your story has inspired something so significant." The mention of Caroline's name no longer provoked that old pang of guilt in Sophia. Instead, there was a sense of gratitude for the way lives can intertwine and create meaning even through pain. "The center is almost ready for the opening." Rebecca approached, holding a folder with the last details of the project. "The art therapy rooms turned out exactly as you visualized, Sophia." "Actually," Julian interjected, "there's something we want to show you, Sophia. Can we go there now?" The group headed for the site of the community center on the Lower East Side. The autumn afternoon sun bathed the almost finished building in golden hues. Julian guided Sophia through the corridors until they reached a special room on the second floor. "This is the Caroline room," he announced softly, opening the door. Sophia stopped, thrilled. The room was a circular space with floor-to-ceiling windows that let in generous amounts of natural light. The walls were decorated with panels that could be used to display works of art, and in the center was a light installation that vaguely resembled the shape of the sapphire necklace, not as a symbol of loss, but as a beacon of hope. "It was Angela's idea," Rebecca explained. "A space dedicated not only to Caroline's memory, but to the idea that art can transform our pain into something beautiful." Sophia felt Julian's arms wrap around her from behind as she absorbed every detail of the space. Therapy sessions with Dr. Henderson had helped the couple turn their own insecurities into strength, and now they were creating a space where others could do the same. "We have one more surprise," Angela said, pulling an envelope out of her bag. "The Therapeutic Arts Foundation has approved a grant to expand the program to 5 other community centers in New York. They want you to lead the project, Sophia." The news took Sophia by surprise. She looked at Julian, who nodded encouragingly. "You're ready for this," he said. "In fact, you always have been." At that moment, Sophia realized how her journey had transformed. What had begun as a story of a necklace and buried lies had become something much bigger, an opportunity to create spaces of healing and transformation for others. "Before I accept," Sophia said, turning to face the group, "I want to make sure we do this together. Julian, Rebecca, Angela, Madeline, each of you has brought something unique to this project. This isn't just my story anymore." "It's our story now," Angela added, smiling softly. Later that evening, Sophia and Julian walked along the High Line, the elevated park that meandered through the west side of Manhattan. Autumn had painted the trees in shades of red and gold, and the city lights were beginning to twinkle around them. "You know what's funny?" Sophia commented, pausing to watch the sun set over the Hudson. "For so long, I thought I needed a physical symbol to feel complete. But true completeness came when I learned to let go." Julian pulled her closer, shielding her from the cool evening breeze. "Sometimes you have to lose something to gain everything." The next day, the first art therapy session would be held in the Caroline Room. Sophia had carefully prepared every detail, incorporating elements she had learned through her own healing journey. The sapphire necklace, now displayed in a glass case in the hospital where Caroline had been treated, had become a different symbol, no longer of secrets and pain, but of transformation and hope. As they drove home, Sophia thought about how a single choice can trigger a series of events that change not only our own lives, but also the lives of others. The community center would be more than a building. It would be a testimony to how love, even through loss and pain, can create something extraordinarily beautiful.